stagger stance cable row, you want to start with your elbow at your side, arm at a right angle. You're going to be loaded into the front foot with the hamstring and the glute activated on this front foot side so the cable doesn't pull you back into your back foot. So from here, we're going to keep our hips fixed, our belly button pointed straight ahead. Punch out as you pull your opposite arm back. Go back to your starting position. Punch, return, punch, return. Now, as you punch, you want to rotate. Your torso is going to rotate, but we're not going to rotate the hips. The hips are going to stay square, pointing straight ahead. We're loaded into this front foot. Belly button's pulled in, chest is up. Return. You don't have to go way back when you return. Show you on the other side. So if we're on the other side, we're not going way back here. We're going to stop where our elbow is, right at our side. We're here, loaded in to the front foot, punch, return, punch, return, getting that upper body rotation, but keeping the hips fixed. We can do this at a faster tempo, or you can go heavier and do it at a slower tempo, really trying to emphasize the rotation through the trunk as you get to the terminal end of that press. The slider lateral lunges. You have your ankle in the band, your foot on the slider. You're going to step out. You want your foot on the slider so that way your heel is actually off the slider, so that way you can rest your adductor just for a second. You're going to take your heel off the ground. You're going to allow the band to pull your leg out to the side. You're dropping into a lunge. You try to keep this knee and hip alignment, and then you're going to stand back up. You should feel the inside of your thighs working as you go from this extended position back together. So you're really going to have to activate the muscles on both legs, inner thighs, to come back to the standing position. Note that my heel stays flat on the floor. My toe is pointing straight ahead, so I don't want to kick my foot out to the side, and I don't want to come into the ball of my foot as I do this. Belly button's in, chest is up. We're going to drop down, thigh almost parallel to the floor, and then we'll return back to our starting position. Again, that heel can be on the ground as you rest between reps. For our finger lock marching, we're applying all the same principles of our standing in neutral, except now we are going to force our body to, our core muscles to stay engaged in that standing in neutral position as we transition from one leg to the other. Now, fingers locked behind your head keeps you from dropping your rib cage back onto your abdomen. So once you have your fingers locked behind you, now it forces that elevated position. So you want those elbows back. You don't want to allow your elbows to collapse forward and your head and your chest to drop down towards the floor. The biggest tendency when we walk is to allow our abdomen to drop towards our pelvis. So we want to really reinforce that cue by keeping our hands behind our head. The other thing it does is it increases the challenge because it raises our center of gravity. Now the weight of our arms are at our head instead of down by our sides, so it makes our rib cage have to do a little bit more work to stabilize, as well as the upper back. So from here, I've got my elbows bent, hands, fingers locked right at the base of my head. My shoulder blades are pinched. All of your principles of your standing in neutral position apply. Pelvis shifts posterior. Pelvis tilts posterior. Rib cage is already elevated. From here, belly button is drawn in. I hold my position. I shift my weight from one foot, or from both feet to one foot, and then we go into a march. Come down, and we transition to the other side. Doing all of this while holding your standing in neutral position. So from the side, you won't see that rib cage collapse because we're keeping all of those key points of our standing in neutral position, right? Pelvis shifted posterior, tilted posterior, rib cage is elevated, T-spine is long, belly button is pulled in, and now we're shifting from foot to foot. Again, you should feel your abdominal muscles working, the muscles of your upper back working, the leg that you're standing on, you should feel a little bit of work going on in the rear and possibly down into the back side of the leg. For monster walks, you'll use the band. The band's going to be around your knees, and it's just going to be below the kneecaps. So the thick part of the top of the thick part of the band is going to be below the kneecaps. You're going to assume a hip width position. You're going to be in a hinge style position while you walk here. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to take a step forward without letting the band come in to bring us out. So as you do these monster walks, belly button's pulled in, you're going to keep the outside part of your hip fired up. As you take a step, you're pushing your knee out against the pull of the band in order to keep your knees in line with your hips and ankles. So you should be constantly pushing in, not letting. What we don't want to do is get into this position where we're trying to push our feet out and our knees stay in. And we also don't want to be walking around like this either. You want to try to keep good alignment, but with that tension on the band. If you're doing it right, you're going to feel these muscles that pull your hip, your legs apart. They're going to be doing the work. So belly button in, chest up. Try to keep your knee in line with your hip and your foot as you take your steps out. Walk this forward. We'll take it back as well. Keep those knees bent. Keep the core muscles engaged.